fact that Luke is careful to mention in this verse in two places the words of Jesus regarding prayer and temptation. The fact that he is careful to arrange his rendition of this occurrence in this particular way suggests that we ought to pay close attention to what is going on in the text. We see there in the 40th verse and also in the 46th verse, or rather, it's 46th verse, that phrase, pray, so that you will not enter into temptation. He arranges those phrases as somewhat bookends. And so he begins with that message and he ends with that message. And it's interesting how when he ends, and a signal that we ought to pay attention to it is because when he says it the first time, they are about to pray. But when he says it the second time, the prayer time is over. And yet, after the prayer time has ended, before they proceed to whatever it is they're going to do, only he knows, he says again, pray, so that you will not enter into temptation. Something is about to happen. There's trouble on the horizon. There's danger in the air. Jesus understands that his disciples are about to enter into a moment, into a period of testing. They have no idea what's going on. Sometimes as we watch these men, it seems as though they are somewhat clueless at times. Jesus is constantly repeating himself, constantly telling them over and over again different things, different lessons, and they never seem to get it. And so now he tells them one more time, pray so that you will not enter into temptation. And I think there's a word there for you and I, sort of a preliminary word, that the Lord, as he did not do with them, you notice he did not tell them what was going to happen. He did not tell them how this testing was going to come. He did not go into any real detail. He did not say in a few moments this is about to happen. He didn't do any of that. But what he was sure to do was to tell them what they needed to do in order to handle what was about to happen that only he knew. And that word for you and I is that sometimes things come upon our lives and we have no idea what's coming. I think we could all agree that times of testing do come. Times of temptation will come. Times of trial and adversity will come, but we never always know when it's going to come, how it's going to come, or from whence it's going to come from. But when we read passages such as this, what we do know is how we can be prepared for it when it comes. The same word that was applicable to the disciples then is the same word that is good for you and I today. Pray so that you will not enter into temptation. Sometimes I try to watch boxing every now and then, and you notice when the fighters come out into the ring, you notice that when they come out, they are already sweating. They're already kind of breathing heavy. They don't come out cold. They don't just walk out, but they're already, because they have spent time in the back, in the training room. They spent time warming up. They spent time they've been jumping around. They've been throwing punch. And so when they come out, they are already ready. They're already sweating. They're already hot. So that when they get in the ring, they could begin to move freely and absorb and defend themselves for what is about to come. And I would argue that is what Jesus is trying to help them to understand here in this text. He brings them out to the garden, not just so that he could pray, but so that they can be praying together, so that they can get warmed up for the fight that is about to ensue. So they're in this garden, and he tells them once at the beginning and once at the end, pray so that you will not enter into temptation. Now, last week we focused in on this first portion of the text, verses 39 through 46. And we talked about this notion of persevering rather, that we might pursue the will of God, God's will in our lives, and how that pertains to his overall plan. But if this passage has something to do with how we can prepare ourselves for the test and the trials that come as we are pursuing God's will, if this passage has anything to do with that, then the next several verses, I believe, help us to see what happens when we are not preparing ourselves. In other words, I believe it tells us what happens when we fail to pray. So Jesus has just gotten off of his knees. He's just dusted off his garments. He's re-engaged his disciples. He gives them that final word, and I'm sure that knowing them, they probably have some questions. What's going on? What do we do next? What's to eat? And all these. You never know what they were talking about, but no sooner than they were about to proceed, they could hear the footsteps. They could see the torches coming close to them, lighting the way. They don't know who it is exactly, but then they notice Judas is leading the pack. And on his right side and on his left are the high priest and the elders, the religious community. And around them there's an angry mob. They have swords. They have clubs. They're coming quickly. They're coming to arrest Jesus. But I could see those disciples there. They're looking and they see this going on and they're wondering what's happening. I could see the adrenaline is beginning to flow. And they're getting nervous and wondering what's going on, what's happening. And I could see them getting anxious there. And it reminds me, it lets me know that this is one of the first things that happens when we fail to pray. When we fail to pray, first of all, we forget that God is in control. That's the first thing that happens when we fail to pray. We have a tendency, when trials, when temptation, when pressure begins to come upon our lives, adversity, we begin to panic, and all of a sudden we forget that God is still in control. They're panicking, they're sweating, they're getting nervous. They see this large mob, this large crowd. Some commentators suggest it could have been as many as 200 temple soldiers coming to arrest this man, Jesus. And the disciples see this and they're panicking. But I would argue, I would venture to say that if for one moment, if they would have turned and just looked over at Jesus, rather than focusing in on the crowd that's coming for them, they would have seen someone that was acting strange. They're nervous. They're probably saying, maybe we ought to run. Maybe we ought to get out of here. I thought about that comedian, Sexually Entertained, talking about We Run. I know y'all seen it. And I could see them getting ready to run. And if they would have looked over at Jesus, they would have seen a man calm, maintaining his composure, sitting and just waiting for what was about to happen. And that's because he was in control. And he knew he was in control. But because they had not prayed earlier, they had forgotten about who was in control. we know that he was in control? Well, there's a whole lot of things that's going on in this passage that we miss if we don't read it closely. First of all, think about the idea that while they're there, now listen to what happens. Here's what happens. They're coming at them, the crowd is coming, and the first thing that one of the disciples says is, what shall we do? Master, what should we do about this situation? Now, earlier, we know they had some sword. They were packing. And we know from other passages that Peter was the ringleader in this particular instance. So they ready, and they say, what shall we do? But no sooner than those words leave their mouths, Peter decides he's going to go for somebody. And commentators suggest, yes, he cut off an ear, but he was going for a head. He was trying to cut somebody's head off. He was trying to split somebody's dome, but he missed and got the ear. Now, here's what happens. Here's the situation. I'm going to get to the control part in a minute, but here's what happens. When we forget that God is in control, immediately we try to take matters into our own hands. You see, they started praying too late. They started trying to consult the Lord too late. They should have been on their knees earlier, consulting the Lord, praying and seeing how they were going to handle whatever was going to come. But now, when it's too late, they're saying, Lord, what shall we do? Isn't that what happens? Life begins to attack us like a whirlwind, and while we should have had a strong prayer life, now that things befall us, what shall we do? But we don't even wait for an answer, because as we're saying, what shall we do, we're trying to figure out ourselves what we're going to do, and it always ends up being the wrong thing. And so here, Peter goes for this man's head. He gets his ear. And look at what Jesus does. First of all, he says, enough of this. And right then, everybody froze. That's God in control. If God wasn't in control, if Jesus didn't have control, they would have just ignored his word, arrested him, and went on about their business. But that's not what happened. Jesus says, stop all of this right now, and everybody stopped what they were doing, because even in that hour, he was still God. And could nothing happen unless he said so. So he said, enough of this. They stopped. God's in control. And then he finds that man's ear. He picks it up and miraculously puts it on. Now, if he's got the power to put an ear back on, surely he had the power to say something or do something to that mob to make them go back to where they came from. As a matter of fact, in another place he said, don't you know I can call down legions of angels to come to my rescue at this hour? Don't you know the power that I have? My kingdom is not of this world, but if I unleash my kingdom, it will take over this world. So he's got the power to tell them to cease. He's got the power to put on an ear. And then listen to what he says. He said, y'all something else. He says, y'all coming out here to get me, right? And you got these clubs, and you got these swords, like you getting ready to do something. You coming out here with a plan. You said, we're going to get strapped up, and we're going to go get this man, and we're going to take him. And that's what's in their minds. He said, listen, I was with you yesterday, the day before. I've been with you every day over there in the temple, and you didn't do nothing. You didn't say nothing to me. You didn't touch me. You couldn't touch me. You know why? Because I decided that right now is your hour. I decided that you wasn't going to do nothing until I gave the word. And so right now you have this little bit of time to do what you want to do, because what you want to do only contributes to what I'm going to do. And so I need you to take me in so that I can go to the cross, so that I can die for the sin of the world, so that I can be risen again and made judge over the world. And if you continue to reject me, I can exact justice upon you. Because there's coming a day where every knee's going to have to bow, and every tongue's going to have to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the Father, and I'm going to see that through. So yeah, you can take me now. It's all right. And yet, the disciples didn't get none of this. And so here's Peter with his sword, 200 folk, I'll give it to you, he was somewhat brave or foolish, one or the other. But he didn't get it. He forgot that we're more than conquerors through him that loves us. He forgot that God that was standing right next to him is our refuge and strength, very present help in the time of battle. He forgot that the battle was not his, it's the Lord's. He forgot all that, and so he's swinging swords, trying to take matters into his own hands. The problem was he failed to pray. And this is what happens when we fail to pray. We forget that God is in control. But not only that, and I'm not going to be with you long this morning, but not only that, when we fail to pray, my brothers and sisters, we forfeit the power that's available to us for resistance. We forfeit the power to resist temptation, to resist trials, to resist when adversity comes upon our lives. We forfeit that power. Now notice how Luke lays it out in the passage. Notice how he draws the contrast. Now, in the beginning, in the previous passages, when they're praying, when Jesus is praying and they're sleeping, the text says in verse 43 that being in anguish, he prayed more fervently. So he's there and he is in anguish. He is agonizing over what is going to happen to him. He's stressing out. He's sweating as if though there were drops of blood. He's saying, Lord, if there's another way, can we figure this out? Jesus, in his humanity, is afraid. But he prays, and then when they come for him, he is cool. Notice the contrast. The disciples, on the other hand, are sleeping, you see. They're taking their rest. They're relaxing. Matter of fact, in Matthew, he tells them, just sleep on and take your rest. They're relaxed. Now, Luke says they have this grief, and that's another topic, but they're sleeping. And so then when the soldiers come for them, instead of being calm and cool and composed, now they are experiencing the anguish that our Lord experienced while he was praying. You see, the difference is Jesus tapped into the power that was available to him to resist what was going to come. They failed to pray and didn't have no power at all. And that is what happens to us. We fail to pray, and then we don't have the power that God promises us to resist whatever is coming against us. There was a man who owned a small business. This business began to do well. So he decided, in order to meet the demands of the customers, in order to grow the business, I'm going to have to get me some new equipment. So he said, one of the things we need is a new copy machine. So he told his secretary, he said, I'm going out of town for a few days, but I want you to order us a new copy machine. I want it to be the best that money can buy. I wanted to have all the bells and whistles. I wanted to have the capacity to do all of the big jobs. I wanted to be the greatest copy machine that money can buy. And so he gives her those orders, and then he said, I'm going, I'll be back in a few days. And so she does just what he says. She gets this copy machine. It costs thousands of dollars, and it has the capacity to do all these different things, has all the functions, everything you wanted to do. It can do it all. So it's delivered. And she goes on vacation. He comes back, copy machine's there. He says, wow, a new copy machine's here. He starts to feel good. He said, I think I'm going to go make a copy. And so he goes to try out his copy machine, but it don't work. So he's saying, something's wrong. He started to push buttons. He's pushing the buttons. His copy machine ain't working. So he gets out the book, gets out the manual. The old copy machine's gone, so now he can't do nothing because the old one is gone. That's thrown away. Gets out the book. Said, how does this thing work? He's pushing buttons. He's mad. He called the copy machine people and started leaning in on them. I bought this machine. The machine don't work. I done got rid of my old one. It's gone. It's thrown away. I can't even access it no more, and this new one is not working right. I want you to send someone out here right now. Within an hour, someone was there, technician. Comes out, and he starts start leaning into him. Man, look, I got this copy machine. The book said it's supposed to be able to do this and this and this and this. My old one's gone, and this one don't work. Man didn't say nothing. He just started looking at the machine. Looked at it. Came around the back. Looked at it. He hooked up the cord, and he plugged it into the wall. And then he looked at him. He said, yes, this machine. And then what he did, he started running some tests on the machine. Started testing it. And it passed every test. And he said, sir, the only problem with this machine, it does everything the book says. It just wasn't hooked up to the power. And my brothers and sisters, the Bible says that when we are saved, we're new creatures. It said the old is passed away, and now the new has come. And we've got this capacity. We've got this ability to do all these kind of things. Greater works shall you do. I'm going away, but you're going to do greater works. And so we've got the capacity to do all sorts of things. But every now and then we find ourselves where we can't do nothing, and it's only because we are not hooked up to the power source. We are not engaged in prayer. The book says that we are able to resist the devil, and he can flee from us. The book says that that we're more than conquerors through him that loved us. The book says that we have access to peace and joy and patience and long suffering and all kinds of spiritual blessing. That's what the book says. But in order to access it, we've got to be hooked up to the power. And the only way that we can stay hooked up to the power is through a life of disciplined prayer. How do we resist the enemy? How do we resist the devil? We've got to be people of prayer. And that's why we're here on 9:30 on Sunday. That's why we're here on Wednesday night. That's why we're on that phone in the morning, because we want to make sure that everybody understands there are opportunities and venues for you to come together and pray so that we can be all together hooked up to the power source. If we don't pray, then we are forfeiting. We are not accessing all that God has for us. We're not making use of the spiritual power that we have. And we cannot do it on our own. As a matter of fact, on our own, we are lifeless and limp, impotent creatures. We have no power in and of ourselves. We think we do. We think we're smart. We think we know how to get around, and we don't have it on our own. That's why we need to come to Jesus in the first place. Because at some point you realize something ain't right here. Something not adding up. And so when we come to the Lord, then we begin to get all that, we begin to become what God made us to become. But if we are not praying people, then we forfeit all of that. And then thirdly, my final point, when we forget to pray, fear sets in, and we stand the chance of forsaking Jesus. Fear sets in, and we stand the chance of forsaking Jesus. Now, you don't see it in this passage, in Luke's rendition. But if you look in Matthew's version, 26th chapter, right around the 56th verse, if you look in Mark's version in the 14th chapter, right around, I think, the 50th verse or somewhere thereabout, you'll see words that say, and they were afraid, and they fled. They abandoned Jesus. Fear sets in, and now the disciples scatter. Fear sets in, and they forsake their Lord. And oftentimes, when trials come in our lives, we want to run from them. We want to get far away from the problem, but in the process, we start running from Jesus. in the process, we tend to go off and try to hide in our little hole somewhere, and we run from the one who loves us the most. We run from the one who wants to wrap us up in his arms and love us even more. We run from everything. We run from Jesus, and we try to go off somewhere and lick our wounds. But what happened in the process is we forsake the Lord. Can you imagine Jesus standing there alone? I heard somewhere, I think I read it, I can't remember now, but the way things worked during that time when people had court cases, they can have people come and be with them and represent them. And they would go and they would be brought for the Sanhedrin or whatever that court was, and they could plead their case, and then someone would be there to represent them. Paul talks about it when he says, Demas has forsaken me, I believe in the book of Ephesians, or 2 Timothy rather. And the idea that here is Jesus about to go on trial, and where most people would have folk with them to help them and support them and to speak on their behalf, Jesus is there alone. They have walked with this man for 3.5 years. They were his closest friends. And as soon as the trials come, they forsake him. And sometimes we forsake him. Sometimes we run out on him. Sometimes we say, I'm not going to hang in there. And we go and try to do our own thing. But here's what's interesting about this whole story. They forsake him. And he knows they're going to do it. He talks about it earlier. So he knows what they're going to do already. And so we don't hear from these men very much until after the resurrection. And after the resurrection, something strange happens. The same one who was abandoned, the same one who was left standing there alone, the same one who his disciples ran out on, is the same one who came to look for them. As a matter of fact, when he got up from that grave, he told those women at the end of Mark, he said, listen, go and tell my disciples to meet me in Galilee. That is where I'll be. Don't come to me, I'll come to you. He wanted to find them where they were. We may forsake him, but he never forsakes us. And I think there's a word there for you and I, that sometimes we get to that point where we want to run out on the Lord. But thanks be to God, he continues to pursue us and look for us and come after us. And then he finds us. We have a good shepherd who cares so much about his sheep. Even if you're that 1 out of 99, he comes and he looks for you. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. So they ran out on him. But at the end of the story, they're right back there with him, because he comes and finds every one of them, even Peter. And then when we get to the book of Acts, after Jesus has gone away, we see them turning the whole world upside down with the gospel of Jesus Christ, because he redeemed them and made them over again, even though in the garden they failed to pray. So the word for you and I today is, let's not do what they did. Let's not take the long way around. But let us be people of prayer. Let us strongly consider the idea that the Lord wants to hear from us regularly, that he wants us to have a disciplined prayer life, a disciplined devotional life, where we meet him at some time during the day, maybe even multiple times, and we commune with him and we fellowship with him, so that we can have power, so that we can have the relationship with him that he desires, which is most important, more important than anything. We can have the relationship, and then when pressure comes, when temptation comes, we'll be able to stand and stand strong. Everyone standing. If you're here today, I'm just going to say it plainly. If you don't know him, if you don't know him, if you never come to a place in your life where you've said, Lord, I need to be saved. I need you. I want a relationship with you. If you never come to a place in your life where you realize that you are just out on your own, and that you have no Savior, and you are feeling and walking in the weight of your sin and guilt and shame,